Today we're going to be talking about what principals need to know in order to support high-quality early childhood education and leadership. My name is Kelly Pollitt. I am the Chief Strategist, Policy and Alliances at NAESP, and I'm joined today. We're happy to be in partnership to offer this presentation with the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists in State Departments of Education, NAECS SDE. So welcome everyone. I know there are a lot of you who are members of that association within State Departments of Education, as well as practitioners, principals, and other guests. Normally these presentations we offer to NASP members only. And because of the importance of the topic, especially from NASP's perspective, we wanted to make sure we were opening the presentation up to a broader audience. So welcome. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my partner in crime today, Andrea Brunell, who joins us from the Office of Early Childhood in Connecticut. Andrea, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself so folks on the line and who will be watching can hear your voice.
Hi, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so thrilled that so many people are logging on this afternoon to listen to this really interesting topic. As Kelly said, my name is Andrea Brunell. I work for the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. I'm also a member of, and it really is a mouthful, the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists in State Departments of Education, or as we finally say, NAECS SDE. I'm here today as a member of the NAECS SDE Leadership Subcommittee, and we're thrilled to be working with NAESP.
So thanks, Andrea. Today what we'd like to do is we have an hour's worth of time. We're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what's happened over the past 4 months, but more importantly, what preceded all of the action to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and how it will impact schools and early childhood programs. Over the past 8 years, I've been spending a lot of time working with principals and school leaders on how to improve instructional leadership, but more importantly, support for instructional leaders as Congress was contemplating reauthorization of what's formerly known as the No Child Left Behind Act. And in that work, we came to a lot of conclusions based on evidence that, quite frankly, we didn't have when we were putting together the No Child Left Behind Act. And that evidence and research really talked about the importance and proved, more importantly, the importance of the role of principals. And so for the past 5 or 6 years almost now, we've been talking with federal policymakers about the importance of principals in leadership and translating that importance into policy recommendations. So as many of you on the line know, and I talk with principals every day, it's really wonderful that what is inherent in knowledge about the importance of their role is now substantiated by the evidence. So we know 2 important facts, and certainly that's next to teachers, principals have an indirect correlation on student achievement, and certainly in the schools that have the greatest impact, they have the greatest impact with the greatest needs. So that premise has really driven our policy work. And of course, as mentioned, the ripple effect. We know so much that leadership is important in setting the tone and vision in communities, and really about bringing together communities. In early childhood, that is so important because principals have a unique role and do straddle 2 entirely different universes, often with different competing funding streams, different programmatic structures. And one thing's for certain, every principal I talk to, and certainly other educators, know that collaboration is the key, especially when we have the interests of young children at the forefront. So again, here, these slides sort of demonstrate the work that we've been doing over the past several years to really elevate the importance of the role of principals in policy and advocacy at the national level. Certainly as big national reform movements were underway, NASP worked diligently to insert the voice of principals in issues like implementing teacher evaluation, but more importantly about supporting their role in that and helping policymakers and practitioners alike understand that teachers and principals need to have differentiated supports, but more importantly, they're hand in glove. There's an inextricable correlation between principals and leadership and the quality of the teaching force within the school and their ability to impact instruction. So as the debate about reauthorizing ESSA and the importance of elevating the role of principals within that discussion became apparent, over the years we also saw the evolution of early childhood education and the research and other issues that began to have an impact on schools, chiefly the expansion of pre-K in many states that was more and more school connected. And broadly speaking, the landscape in education reform changed dramatically, even over the past decade, if you include the emphasis on an era on high-stakes testing, which we hope the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction now with the new law, which we'll get to. But the policy shifts were really based on all of the evidence that I've mentioned here. And while the public discourse and policy continue to primarily address the quality of the teaching force, we now see greater emphasis on principals, but also more narrowly focused on pre-K3 leadership. So national and state policy trends are really shifting based on the evidence of how students learn and the skills they acquire to be successful. So for schools who've always known how important it is to address the physical, social, and emotional as well as cognitive needs of students, there's greater recognition that educators have to work more holistically to meet the learning needs of students. And more recently, obviously the neuroscience and child development research that Andrea will talk about shows that students from pre-kindergarten through high school thrive in school and life when they can master skills that include focus and self-control, perspective taking, communicating, making connections, critical thinking, all of the things that I know many of you on the line listening today are all too familiar with the success of young children. So while teachers and principals are tackling these seismic shifts in practice, and especially with the shifts in instructional leadership in response to early learners, we know that educators are focused on students' mastery of these skills across subjects and working together to provide a framework and curriculum even that will lead to deeper understanding of many of the skills young children need to have. The result, we hope, and again, speaking to effective solutions, is this renewed collaborative focus on higher standards across K-12 and early learning, but that those standards that are developmentally appropriate and take into account early learning that must be overlaid with academic to result in a broadened perspective. At NASP, we're working with our principals to help them think about this new paradigm shift as pre-K3, or the time in a child's life from pre-kindergarten through third grade, or age 3 to grade 3. We obviously recognize that birth is a time in birth to 3 is a significant time in a child's life, and that certainly doesn't mean to discount that time, but really talking more specifically about principal practice. We're talking about, for purposes of this presentation today, and in some of the publications we'll be highlighting, age 3 to grade 3. So in recent years, as noted, the nature of the discussion around early childhood has shifted to a lot of the discussion on child development that has really influenced principals' practice, and in turn has really influenced policy and related discussions. So we know that achievement gaps also appear early and widen over the years. So arguably, also with the investment in early childhood, as you'll see here in this slide, and this is an infographic from a publication I'll share with you later in the presentation that everyone will be able to access. But really, because of the research paired with the return that we know investments in early childhood will give in terms of comparing remediation that are significantly lowered in terms of helping children improve later on in their academic career. Really, early childhood needs to be leveraged to make a difference in the lives of children, so why wouldn't we invest in pre-K3 and early learning? And I think more now more than ever before, principals and educators understand the significance of early childhood, and it's because of these just very compelling statistics. But now we're at the point where we need to have a conversation about building successful early childhood education systems that will lead to pre-K through grade 3 alignment, learning and developmental systems, and make sure that that's a national and a state priority. So investment in critical areas of the education system and practice are essential, and especially for kids from low-income or disadvantaged backgrounds who are at risk of beginning behind their peers, and make sure they have a chance to learn on equal footing. So creating and supporting the optimal pre-K3 learning continuum for every child requires a strong commitment by principals and educators to break down silos and ensure that everyone will work together and really realize that vision of collaboration to ensure that all students' needs are met. So this means that systems have to be in place at the state and local level to empower educators. And at NAESP and working with our partners at NAECS SDE, we're hoping that we can really make a difference now and use the new law, the Every Student Achieves Act, that we'll get into a little bit, to really impact those systems. And we know as part of the systems, the key components include high quality universal pre-K, full day K, very important issue, qualified teachers who have both a bachelor's degree and specialized training in how young people learn, opportunities for teachers to share data, planning and professional learning, strong leadership, a developmentally appropriate curriculum, and shared accountability between educators and leaders to support effective instruction in the whole child. And again, we can't underscore the importance of the role of the principal to be leading in those collaborative efforts. So our work, just so the audience is familiar with why we're involved in all of this, it's not only the research and the data and all of the compelling statistics about investing in early childhood, but also leadership. We're also hearing from the field and from principals how they are hungry for professional learning and support to help them further develop their instructional leadership capacity in early childhood education. And we know that even from the surveys, the U.S. Department of Education has made available that LEAs spend roughly 3 to maybe 4% on supporting leadership capacity, and that's in all areas, early childhood through K-12. Really, there's a need to address not only early childhood leadership, but principal leadership in general. Many principals have reported, for instance, that in even statewide opportunities, there may be some professional learning, but really the content's focused on helping support the teachers, where the principals are invited, and that's sort of considered their professional development. So we know we can do better. And really our priorities in reauthorization reflected that need. And again today we're going to be talking about the importance of this new law and how it supports early childhood education. As you can see, it was a key priority in NAESP's platform for ESSA reauthorization, specifically to support principal leadership along that pre-K3 continuum. So here we are, Every Student Succeeds Act. Many of you know, hopefully you know. In December, the bipartisan bill was signed by the President. It was truly a unique experience in recent years because so much has been polarized, legislatively speaking. But it was a concerted effort by Democrats and Republicans to come together, and there's some really, from our perspective, some groundbreaking work that's been included in the Every Student Achieves Act. And this chart here really exemplifies, if you had to put in a nutshell, what has changed from No Child Left Behind now to this current law, ESSA. And while we have a lot of issues outlined here, this presentation, again, the ESSA Nuts and Bolts presentation series, we cover a lot of these issues, and you'll see more presentations about some of these other topics, but we're going to focus right there on that early childhood education and professional learning. Again, the priorities that we've outlined in our advocacy strategy. So now we're talking about what ESSA means for states and districts. And on this presentation, we're so grateful that Andrea is going to be working with us. So while we have a lot of principals on the phone, I think we're emulating that sort of collaboration we want to see at the state and local level. Because of ESSA, states and districts now have an unprecedented opportunity to address both principal leadership and early childhood education. It's really an opportunity in a way to take what are scarce resources and use them in the evidence-based practices. In terms of the nuts and bolts in ESSA, early childhood education is supported in not only Title I, but very strongly in Title II as part of professional learning and development for both teachers and principals. In Title I, there are explicit use of funds for early childhood education and preschool. State and local plans, which we know in many states, that kind of work is underway. It's important on this topic to note that the law really shifts the disposition of federal education policy to now place the authority for planning processes, procedures, and programs to the state and local districts. State and local districts must abide by a consultation and planning process as they're developing their plans for Title I and other programs within ESSA, with a very iterated list of stakeholders that includes and must include many of you on the phone. So we hope that if your state and you haven't heard yet anything that's going on as far as working groups and outreach or engagement, please take the opportunity for this presentation affords to reach out and start thinking about what that may mean for you and your community. Because in addition to early childhood in Title II, and as well as Title III and Title IV, and Title IX, and there are various programs and sections that support different functions in order to increase services for young children, but also to provide professional learning. Please take this information and use it as a way to start a dialogue and have a conversation. So just talking for a second about some of the provisions in Title II, which I think many of you on the phone and on this presentation would care most about what's in Title I and Title II. In addition to the state plans, there are some requirements about coordinating services. So that means communications, family engagement, also for agreements between schools and Head Start centers. And the interesting thing about Title I now is these kinds of activities were always allowable under Title I. It's just more explicit and I think expanded upon in the new Title I. So I always like to point a lot of our practitioners to a 2012 Office of Early Learning guidance on Title I and use of funds for early ed that was issued. It's a fantastic document. We're really hoping that the department is working along the lines of issuing another guidance document so that practitioners can start thinking about how, in districts, can start thinking about using those Title I funds for early ed, states as well. In Title II, there's very specific, actually, let's go back one, sorry, thanks, Honor. There's some very specific language about collaborative professional learning, use of funds opportunities for both states and districts. And that would afford practitioners, both early childhood educators, teachers, teacher leaders, principals, to come together and have those collaborative learning experiences for planning and to address the needs of young children for preschool and other programs, especially related to transition issues. That was important language that was included in the law. It's also unprecedented, so we're extraordinarily pleased about that. Andrea is going to talk a little bit more about those nuts and bolts, and we'll be weighing in together. So to advance along, we're just providing some statutory and timeline issues. A lot of people are wondering about what, at the federal level at least, we could be seeing from the Department of Education related to ESSA and when implementation will begin. So we've noted just some statutory issues. Go ahead and advance. And basically what this timeline says is that full implementation of ESSA is slated to begin by the school year 2017-2018. So right now, at least at the federal level, we're going through what's called the negotiated rulemaking process on some very narrow issues related to Title I and assessment. We're not going to get into that right now. They don't relate to early ed. But we are hoping between now and the end of the year we'll at least see perhaps some guidance or technical assistance that may be available to states and districts and to stakeholders to use as they're having these conversations about putting Title I state and local plans together. I know personally I've had some conversations with some principals in some states who are really getting on top of how to use their Title I funds for early ed. I know in Washington they have a subgroup and they're working hard to really start talking about these issues. So now's the time to be planning and getting ready for that full implementation. On the money side, this is the first budget cycle that will begin to align to ESSA programs. We saw some of that in the budget request, and right now there are some funding issues that Congress is, of course, grappling with. So, you know, again, using those scarce resources wisely is what we are advocating for. So we are certainly going to continue to make the early childhood provisions and funding of those early childhood provisions, including the preschool development grants, which are already is already a grant-funded program at the administration is offering to expand early learning opportunities. Those programs and issues will continue to be a priority. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who will walk us through really how we can apply this new law to practice and really see some results.
Thanks very much, Kelly. It's really exciting to be partnering with NAESP. On behalf of the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists and State Department of Education, we really appreciate the partnership, and we really are pleased to introduce our association to all of you out there and to hopefully spark an idea, the great potential of co-production and how we can begin these efforts. Using ESSA as the big idea that can bring people to the table, co-production really requires a shared understanding. Conversations like these begin to bring together what many people think are different sectors. For example, childcare and public education. This is an example of multiple sectors serving the same children and families with really similar goals. Instead of viewing ESSA as a challenge, we need to view it more as an opportunity to think deeper, more broadly, and perhaps more intentionally about our work in relation to the work of others who may be located really close to where you're sitting. So very quickly, just an introduction to NAECS SDE. We have about 140 members who are active in states across the country. They reside in state departments of education, or even though we referred to early childhood specialists in state departments of education, we do have members that sit in perhaps your state's Office of Early Learning or Early Childhood. Many states have more than one member as well. States that currently don't have active members in NAECS SDE are Texas, Utah, Wyoming, Alaska, North Dakota, and New York. So if anybody from those states are out there listening, feel free to be in touch with us to find out more about NAECS SDE. All the other states are represented by one or more people. And again, the website is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'd encourage you to come on over and visit us. Next. I'll begin with the what, the current situation, then move on to so what, the context, and wrap up with now what. What are the future outcomes we're looking to get to? Next. Next, please. Early childhood is mentioned throughout ESSA. ESSA provides guidance to local education agencies on the option of investing Title I funds to improve or to expand early childhood programs. as well as providing professional development on family engagement and child development to both early childhood and K-12 teachers and principals. Title II, as Kelly went over, presents opportunities for the states in their professional development plans that may include early childhood education and school readiness as priorities, and may provide training for early childhood education teachers and administrators. States may apply for the Literacy Education for All Results for the Nation, which are LEARN grants, which include a set-aside of 15% of funding for birth to kindergarten activities or pediatric literacy programs. That's in Title II, Part B. States may also invest in early childhood education programs for dual language learners and may apply for the Dual Language Learner National Professional Development Project that may support early childhood. The law strengthens federal support for early learning and provides new opportunities for birth to grade 3 alignment, accountability, and funding. Next. State report cards must include the number and percentage of students enrolled in an early childhood program, so any program serving children age 6 or less. A district may choose, note that you keep hearing me say may because it's not a requirement, it's may choose to use Title I funds for early childhood. If they do choose to use their Title I funds for early childhood, then their Title I plan must talk about how they plan to support, coordinate, and integrate services, and that includes transitions. Even if they're not using funds for early childhood, school districts receiving Title I funds must coordinate with early childhood programs. So examples of coordination may include receiving records, meetings with families, kindergarten transition plans, all those kinds of things. Also, districts using Title I funds must meet the Head Start performance standards. Just a little note here, though, that Health and Human Services is in the rulemaking process for the standards, so we could be seeing some changes. Title I schools operating as school-wide programs must have a plan for addressing the needs of all students. This may include strategies for assisting preschool children in the transitions from early childhood programs to local elementary schools. Schools have flexibility on how they use these funds. Targeted Title I schools must describe how the funds will be used for Title I eligible students, and again, this may include transition to kindergarten strategies.
Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and encourage folks to type in questions as you're talking about these really specific examples about using Title I funds. If folks have a question, to please type your question in the box on the lower right-hand side.
Thanks, Kelly. Again, I want to stress that state report cards must include the number and percentage of students enrolled in any program servicing children age less than 6, not just 3 and 4-year-olds. So this is an instance where that birth to age 3 cohort does come into play. Next. So what could this look like? Title I engagement funds may be used for joint professional development that can include early childhood educators, and that can include teachers, principals, paras, support staff, as well as parents and other family members. It also could include networking, finding the families that are in need by utilizing state and local networks. This can be done through existing entities like your local councils or your state early childhood advisory council or Head Start associations. Next. Think about who sits where in your state and how the different entities may be able to work together. There are early childhood state specialists working full-time in 44 states that reside in either departments of education or offices of early learning. States have 619 coordinators, coordinators of Part C services, and Title I coordinators. The conversations between key people who have relationships with local entities such as early childhood councils can really leverage action through the exchange, through that open exchange and that back and forth of ideas. Next. Title II presents opportunities for state professional development plans that may include early childhood education and school readiness as priorities and may provide training for early childhood education teachers and administrators. Kelly, do you want to jump in here with any more specifics on Title II?
Well, sure. So, Title II, as Andrea noted, it has many parts. And one of the things I want to emphasize as we're sharing these very specific examples, ESSA very much should be looked at the sum of its parts. There's not any one way to get at early childhood in any one program in ESSA. We really want you to see in totality the number of opportunities that we have now to address early childhood. And really, in some cases, we have districts and states who are further along in this alignment and coordination than others. But Title II is really an opportunity, no matter where you are, to help bring together educators and really engage in that near-term professional learning that can have an impact in schools, in centers, in communities. And just a little bit on the technical side, Title II has a new phased-in formula. So the concentration of Title II Part A formula grants to states is changing. It's moving to a 20 to 80% ratio of population on poverty. And really what that means is that we're going to have a higher concentration of funds targeted to poverty. So you'll see some states who, under the previous formula, you may see some of those funding allocations go down. And again, this is a phased-in formula. We have, if you're from a specific state and you'd like to know a projection of your Title II Part A fund, I can share that with you. If you want to type in a question, I'll get back with you after this webinar and give you your state's projection on Title II Part A. But really, that aside, Title II now has a use of funds for both states and districts that's very specific about bringing together these collaborative groups of early childhood practitioners with teachers, principals, and others to engage in this deeper learning on early childhood education and developmentally appropriate practice, as well as instructional leadership. So we couldn't be more excited about this.
Great, thanks, Kelly. We can go to the next slide. So continuing with the what, we know that local districts have professional development plans. Collaborating with entities that serve the early childhood workforce, regardless of the setting people choose to work in, can really serve to support and enhance the perspective of everyone at the table. Next. Take a minute and think about who sits where in your state and how perhaps these entities can work together. Again, you can utilize your early childhood state specialists to help broker relationships across early childhood professional development and QRIS systems and higher education institutions. Your Title II coordinators could also be very much of assistance. And if your state has a professional learning advisory committee, it'd be great to utilize that resource for conversations with local PD delivery entities that serve both public schools and the larger early childhood community. Next. As Kelly mentioned before, there's a great deal of science out there about our youngest learners. We have a really good understanding of the neurobiology of brain development. We know that the early years matter and that lifelong learning and success is built on the foundation that starts with our youngest learners. We also know that it's about the whole child and that all areas of development are important to building a lifetime of success. Next. We also know that young children are in their prime when it comes to acquiring knowledge, and the ease at which they do so is pretty amazing. When you look at this graph, it's pretty stunning to see the capacity for learning that we should be capitalizing on with our youngest learners. In this graph, it's really easy to see that the amount of effort required to learn in the early years is much different than as we age. If we're looking for a return on investment, the early years are certainly where we're most likely to get the biggest bang for our buck. Personally, the graph, I find it a little depressing since I'm in my 50s and therefore fall way over to the right, but it explains so much about why learning new things takes us more effort, than when we get older, and why early learning investments give us such a great return on the investment. Next. Science has come a long way in supporting our understanding about how to support young children and families in building a strong foundation for life. The public schools are not the cornerstone that can support or fix everything. A strong foundation requires support from all the corners and the edges. Working together to co-produce great ESSA plans that include early childhood in a meaningful way will require an effort to reach out to people that you normally may not think about. Next. I know that we're all used to the idea of collaboration, but I'd like you to think in a little bit of a different way so we can operationalize our work around ESSA. I'm asking you to think about going a little deeper and perhaps a bit more intentionally about this work. Co-production is deeper than collaboration. It's based on shared understandings of the complexities of the issues and then intentionally planning solutions. Next. It's important to get everyone in on the conversation. I know when you look at this graphic it looks overwhelming, but it can be done when you connect with people who know people. Sharing perspectives helps to illuminate the issue in ways that you haven't thought about and allows for creative thinking about solutions. Many of us spend a great deal of time in our personal affinity groups thinking about things the way we've always thought about them. Just having a different combination of thinkers at the table with their various perspectives may be just the spark that's needed to creatively think about how to move from the what to the so what to the now what. Next.
Andrea, before you move on, and I'm interjecting this question because it's come up quite a bit, what is a 619 coordinator and Part C coordinator? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. 619 is special education. We're talking about IDEA, and Part B would be preschool. Part C is early intervention.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're asking you to check out the Center for Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes, the CELO website, for a directory of state early learning contacts. State specialists aren't listed separately, but just ask the state early childhood lead that's listed and you'll find a specialist. Also not listed in the directory but equally important are your Title II coordinators. I've included a link on the slide. You can see it right underneath the state EC directory link to find a listing of Title II coordinators. I encourage you to ask your Department of Education about their plans for planning for ESSA. Think about who is at the table and what is the time frame that they have for planning. Next. Thank you so much for inviting NAECS SDE to collaborate. We're here to help, and we really feel that this is the beginning of a wonderful relationship between NAECS SDE and NAESP at the national level. We think that this is really going to help strengthen relationships not only at the national level, but also at the state and the local levels. And I couldn't help but thinking, given at least the beautiful spring weather we have here in the Northeast right now, that this work is really sort of, to me, I see a gardening metaphor. I think it's all about the work. I think what we're doing right now is really preparing the soil. We're adding fertilizer, we're aerating the soil, we're putting the compost in and mixing it all up. Now it's time for all of you to choose which plants are going to do the best in your locations. As Kelly said, there are a lot of different ways to do things. And so now it's going to be up to you to decide what will grow and how to nourish those plants so they'll grow and flourish the best in your area. We at the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists at State Departments of Education really look forward to co-producing with all of you.
Thanks, Andrea. That's so helpful. Go ahead, Honor. Okay, so I'm going to pick up on that point you were making about consultation and planning. So this presentation was meant to really help you start thinking about the different areas and ways in which you can leverage ESSA for the purpose of building out your early childhood program services and building professional capacity. And at NASP we get a lot of questions about, well, what can I do? What do I do next? And your analogy is a great one about now's the time to start getting prepared, participating in those processes that are so varied. We know that states and districts are in different places. Some are further ahead and some are not. And really we want to be able to give you the tools, and in many cases that begins with knowledge and background of the opportunities afforded in ESSA to start thinking about the issues in your learning community, and that's from birth through age 8. And really how, whether you're a principal or a State Department of Education specialist or an early childhood practitioner or a researcher, how you can begin to really address the needs of various learning communities and create your own roadmap and identify the areas. Is it that coordination with IDEA, which coincidentally is required under ESSA for many of these programs, or perhaps it really intersects with what is a new block grant in ESSA known as the Student Enrichment Grants, which really help address student mental health. I'm hearing more and more from principals and other teachers who talk about the needs for early intervention and mental health services, community schools. All of those programs and funding opportunities are available in ESSA. And to reiterate what Andrea said about the choices at the state and local district now. It's no longer a top-down federal approach to policy now. Really, the only requirements that states and districts, certainly accountability requirements, and there are contours of the new law that have to be abided by, but really it's an option and available use of funds for states and districts to address these important areas. So we're encouraging folks to identify issues, whether it's early childhood, the intersection of special ed and student mental health services, and begin to create your new roadmap and talk with your state and local leaders about how these priorities need to be included in the plans. Again, as far as timing, we're hearing that state plans may be available due in spring of next year. Many states are back mapping from that time to determine what their state plan process may be. We are hearing certainly that by the end of the year, everyone should be in a pretty good place. So that means looking through the summer and fall and winter to really get a handle on where states and districts are going with regard to ESSA and planning for the 2017-2018 school year. So start thinking about that now. There's a requirement in the law that says that states have to post their plans 30 days prior to issuing them and submitting them for approval to the Department of Education. If you've waited to submit your comments and your suggestions and ideas or your roadmap until then, it's too late. So one thing we want to share with you, which we hope you can use as a tool to have these important conversations in your communities, is a publication NASP worked on and released in 2014. And it's an updated series, Leading Learning Communities, which we've repositioned as leading pre-K3 learning communities and competencies for effective principal practice. And really this publication is meant to help practitioners and instructional leaders, even teachers, teacher leaders, and others who care about early childhood education start thinking about that pre-K3 continuum and the competencies and instructional leadership that are needed. It's a public...
Kelly,
Yes.
I just wanted to appreciate the publication. We use it a lot here in Connecticut, and we found it to be exceptionally helpful. And I know that every principal that I've spoken with that has taken a look at this document and used the self-assessment tools has just really found it to be incredibly informative and beneficial.
That's great. We're overjoyed to hear that. One of the things that we're focusing on is, again, the publication is not a curriculum. It talks a lot about the what, not necessarily the how, but it does contain a significant number of strategies and ways that practitioners can use the strategies or the what around the strategies to really think about their own practice and what kinds of instructional leadership skills need to be further developed. And a lot of it also responds to principals who are traditionally prepared along K-12 certification and licensure requirements who maybe don't have a grounding in developmentally appropriate practice. So really helping them think about that and then start to begin to lay a deeper foundation in that early childhood space and then adapt their leadership skills to meet the needs of young learners. This is a priority And as you can see here, these are the competencies that are laid out in the publication, and it also includes strategies and self-reflection, as Andrea noted. It's a very intense publication. We're very proud of it. NASP is also working to develop some curricular materials around it, and we hope to be able to release those, but stay tuned, those are coming. So again, just a little bit about NAESP and the ways in which we're working to support the profession. I do want to highlight this last initiative here, which is NASP's annual conference, which will be happening this summer in National Harbor, Maryland. And you can find more information about it at that website at the bottom of the slide. I should point out that NASP, for the second year in a row, it's the first time we've really, the second time we've had a focused strand on pre-K3. We have sessions that will align to each of our competency areas. We have tremendous thought leaders who will be coming to share information and practical resources and tools to help principals really, and others, teams of principals, teacher leaders, early childhood specialists, and others who can come and really use the publication and other research tools and resources to learn the how, not just the what, and take that information back to their learning communities and apply it. So we encourage all of you, especially at the state level, to consider sending teams of your teachers and your principals to our conference. We know it's going to be a tremendously helpful experience to really get that practical knowledge at a level that folks need to address the needs of early learners. So additional resources for those of you who want to dig into more of the policy areas in ESSA. There's some resources here. Other organizations who are certainly great partners in the field. We want to point you to the good work that they've been doing, and we look forward to working with them as well in partnership to continue to support early childhood education. So with that, and don't despair, I know we flipped through those slides pretty quickly. You should be able to download everything and make sure that you have the resources that we pointed to. But right now we want to go to some of the questions. We have just a couple of minutes left on the line. So Andrea, I might pass some of these questions to you. One of the things that folks are asking about are resources that LEAs and states at the staff level who maybe aren't familiar with Head Start standards. What would be the best advice that you have and resources that you could direct them to?
Well, I would suggest that they approach whatever their association is. So in Connecticut, we have the Connecticut Head Start Association, and we also, Head Starts also have training and technical assistance networks, and the people that are involved with any of these would love to be able to speak with any school personnel, any K-12 people, and be able to share with them some of the resources. I have to let you know that online, Head Start has, and I get acronyms fouled up, so I'm not even going to try to remember the specifics, but it's eClick, where there are just tons and tons of resources about what's going on in Head Start. But the first place to go really is to your state association, and they will be happy to hook you up.
So on that point, there's a question that, many districts, when you're talking about aligning programs, and you have perhaps some schools that aren't necessarily in compliance with some of the standards, do you have a suggestion for how you can begin to address those issues, where if you have a district who really wants to think about how to use Title I funds in a way that would help schools and other centers really work to meet the vision of those standards and guidelines, do you have any suggestions for folks who may be in that position?
Absolutely. I know that from my experience, getting people to the table and being able to have conversations about what we know good practice is always a really good place to start. So if you're a pre-K-12 public school organization, being able to have a community of learners and inviting your community people in, because there's a lot of expertise on both sides, and I really think having those sort of deep, rich professional conversations really helps bring out some of the idea about standards. And then keeping in mind too, where sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about the difference between program standards and child standards, and just really being able to sit down and dig in and sort of tease apart what it is you're working on.
Thank you. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in. We have a couple more minutes remaining. But as people are thinking about some questions they might have, Andrea, can you share any issues or problems of practice that, as you've used the publication leading pre-K3 learning communities, can you share a little bit more about your sessions and some of those problems of practice that have come up?
Sure. I really need to say that we here at the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood have worked very, very closely with our principal membership organization, the Connecticut Association of Schools, and the way we have approached the document is the Connecticut Association of Schools has held sessions and done separate sessions on the competencies. And I think, Kelly, you made an excellent point that this book really is about it's really a good tool for self-reflection. It's not a cookbook. It's not the kind of a publication you go through and you check off all the individual criteria, and when you're able to check them off, you know, you're done. It really is a good tool for self-reflection. So I think that those communities of practice, being able to dig into those individual competencies, has been extremely helpful here.
Great. We do have a couple of questions about ELL services and if they will be provided to include early learners, and the answer is yes. Specifically in Title III, which is a place we didn't dig into too much, but it's also an area of ESSA that includes professional learning. Many of you may know to support English language learners, and the accountability provisions that used to be in Title III have now been moved to Title I. So Title III really does support professional learning and practice to help teachers, principals, early childhood practitioners, and others really develop the instructional skills that are necessary to support young English language learners as well. And there's an interesting provision in Title III under national activities that would provide a new center on early learning in ELL. So that's a provision. We'll be waiting to see if it's funded, and it would be something that will be executed by the next administration, so we'll all be sitting and waiting to see that happen. But it is important language, and again, it speaks to the unprecedented opportunity and through language that's provided around early childhood in ESSA for both leadership, instruction, and support and services for young children. So another question, when would the Title I funds be available to support a pre-K kindergarten summit? So that's a great example about how you can use funds to provide both professional learning and start a dialogue to address transition issues. But as I noted, this is the first budget year that the appropriations cycle will begin to align to ESSA programs, but that's not until the end of this year. I will say this, and I mentioned this before, all of you currently have Title I funds. And the difference between No Child Left Behind and ESSA in many regards, while ESSA is much stronger and greater emphasis on early learning and specific use of funds that are an option for states and districts, you can still use your Title I funds from the current law and current program for the purpose of early childhood. So if that means really bringing together practitioners, and that includes Title I funds for professional learning, to talk about these aligned systems and supporting early learners from birth to 8, you can certainly do that now.
And I would really sort of underscore that with having those conversations about transitions from early childhood programs for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds into kindergarten is really important, and being able to have the conversations that transition is more than just an event, that it really requires having those conversations to do a really good job.
I would also argue using some of that in family engagement, those funds that are currently a part of both the existing structure of ESSA and the new ESSA, which there's an increased state use of parent and family family engagement funds to include early ed through things like communication, outreach on transition issues, really helping get those families of, perhaps English language learners more engaged and aware of the services and opportunities for their children. So don't wait, I think, is what I want to say. Don't wait until ESSA sort of hits the ground. Now's the time to be talking with states and with the state leaders who are on the phone, talking to your counterparts within the Title I directors, other offices. The new law also provides an authority for governors. So you have the governors who getting to that consultation requirement as Title I and other program plans are being developed. Governors working with state boards and state chiefs have to assure that they've engaged in meaningful consultation with stakeholders as these plans are developed. Again, that is a requirement, and we're encouraging you, all of you on the phone, to really be a part of those conversations, whether it's on early ed, whether it's on ELL, or other areas. We really, we can't emphasize that enough.
And I would think, staying with that don't wait kind of theme, I think that, we tried to, I guess, illuminate a little bit for you about that don't wait philosophy with regard to early childhood, that there really is sort of that return on investment, bang for your buck, when you're able to start working with children and their families at a really young age, that it's not something that you're just going to get that immediacy from, that it's going to pay off in the long term. It will really pay off in the long term.
And I think some of the questions that are coming in, they're also very interesting today, and my contact information, I think Honor has provided. Andrea, we won't do that to you unless you'd like us to post your email address. But I think some of the questions that are coming in are raising some interesting points, more so that, now's the time. If we're going to truly be collaborative, we have to be respectful. Respectful of both the demands on principals with accountability, but also of early childhood practitioners and their role with developmentally appropriate practice. I think we would offer that this presentation today shows that there's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot that we talk about is this pre-K3 alignment, that's how we have to be thinking. It's not to disregard 0 to 3. It's meant to encompass it. So it's really time to sort of come together with the shared interests and responsibilities for these young children. So we're looking forward to taking advantage of all of these opportunities ESSA now affords, and use it as leverage, use it as a tool to come together. We've never before seen this, and while the new law is only authorized for 4 years, which is different than previous iterations of ESSA. They were previously authorized for a longer period of time, usually 6 or 7 years. We won't talk about how outdated No Child Left Behind was, but ESSA is authorized for 4 years. So, but we expect the law to be around for much longer than that. So now's the time to start getting to it. So with that, I just heard a beep go off, which I think means that I'm finished. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Andrea. It was a pleasure. We really appreciate your expertise. And please, anyone, if you have a question, need a resource, would like another copy of any publication, please let us know. And this session has been recorded and will be available by noon tomorrow Eastern Standard Time at www.naesp.org/webinars. Thank you.